So, Berto, a lot of people have been asking us to watch the Netflix documentary, I Just Killed My Dad.
Yes.
So we watched it this week. I actually watched the whole thing today, and let's get into it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I reupholster bed knobs and broomsticks.
So this is a documentary on Netflix, and if you want to watch it before listening to this episode, I'd recommend doing that because it's pretty good, and it has some twists and turns.
Yeah.
And it's pretty short, 3 episodes. So this is a documentary about a recent event that happened in 2019, I believe. It's about Anthony Tomplay. He was 17 years old, and he shot his father, killed him, or almost killed him. He died a couple days later in the hospital.
Fatally wounded.
Fatally wounded him, intentionally shot his father, and called the police himself. That's where the name of the documentary comes from. I Just Killed My Dad.
I Just Killed My Dad.
He walked outside, waited for the police to come. It's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which, according to the defense attorney, has the highest incarceration rate in the United States, which
that's crazy.
I didn't know. Anthony Tomplay, he thought that the police would come, would question him. He would say, my dad was abusive, and he'd be free, and everything would be over. The whole situation would be over.
He had a similar perspective to the law that I did when I saw OJ fleeing in the white van. It was kind of the opposite. I thought, oh, okay, well, he's clearly guilty. Do they just send him straight to jail for 30 years? Like, how does this work? It was sort of the opposite of that. Like, well, I mean, they'll clearly see that I was fine, and so, you know.
Right. So what do you think the initial news stories were?
I'm imagining that it was similar to how I felt in the first episode. So when you told me to watch it, I thought this was more like the story about a psychopath. That's what I thought. Oh, we're going to talk about a psychopath. It's interesting. And certainly when they start presenting it, he comes off that way, like unempathetic, like no feeling, like what's going on. I'm imagining that the narrative was, and apparently they had some amount of money. So that the narrative was like, hey, this spoiled rich kid just offed his dad, doesn't care, talk about a psychopath, like that kind of thing. That's what I'm imagining was the...
Right, exactly. It was a spoiled rich kid shoots his father, sort of thing, because they lived in a nicer suburban neighborhood. But when we start looking into it, it gets a little bit more interesting. And again, I would watch the documentary before listening to this episode. I'm just going to go through my notes here. The first topic I want to talk about is the subject of how he didn't show any emotion.
Right.
He shoots his father. He calls 911. They come get him. The police note that he seems unemotional. They bring him in to the station, and they're questioning him at 6 in the morning because he called 911 at 3 in the morning. He is reported as having no emotion.
And on the call too, like on the 911 call, it's sort of like, hey, I just shot my dad.
Right, exactly. So they were surmising that they were, I think, implying that he must be a cold-blooded psychopathic killer because he didn't show any emotion. What do you think about that?
That is how I perceived it at first too. Even in the initial interviews they were showing, I was thinking, they doesn't seem to care. He's just like, I just shot him. Like, what's up? Yeah. And so that is the feeling I got. I'd be surprised that average people wouldn't get a similar feeling. So yeah, it makes sense. Without any additional context, you'd be like, wow, you just killed your father and this is your reaction? Like,
And they were saying, well, normally we would see lots of crying, even if they're confessing, even if they're saying, oh my God, it was a self-defense. Is he okay? But I didn't mean to, but I didn't know what else to do. More distress that they would, I guess, see. After watching the whole documentary, what do you think about that implication that he must be a cold psychopathic killer because he didn't show emotion?
Right. Well, what I got was actually that he has, sorry to use the word without knowing all the context, but some sort of attachment problem, because he was essentially in an abusive state from very little. He lost 2 mothers essentially, and had this very, very traumatic relationship with his father, and he was not precluded or excluded from participating in society in any normal way and being socialized. And so I think he has attachment issues, and he doesn't know how to socialize normally, and he doesn't express those emotions in any way that we perceive as normal. But that doesn't mean that he's sitting there fantasizing about murdering and torturing people.
Yeah. And psychopaths know how to fake emotion.
That's a great point, because in the cops interviews I have watched with, debatably, but more typically psychopathic type killers, they're like, oh my God, they have all this story that they're telling and this whole narrative, and like a Ted Bundy kind of thing,
Right.
Yeah.
Because for them, they often are pathological liars and can't help themselves but to fake and lie and deceive.
And they're trying to charm and kind of like...
He wasn't doing anything like that. This is something that I really want to put out there, and I've said this in many different episodes in many different contexts. A similar thing happened to, I want to call her by the terrible name that the newspaper called her in Italy, Amanda Knox.
Oh, Amanda Knox, yeah.
So she was also implicated as the murderer because directly after the murder of her roommate, there's a video footage of her and her boyfriend looking kind of like they're making out at the crime scene. There's the ambulance and the cop cars, and they're just off to the side having been questioned recently, and they're like caressing each other and touching each other, and they seem kind of distressed, but also like they're having an intimate sexual affectionate moment. And there's other examples, like I will bring up Lindy Chamberlain from Australia, a dingo ate my baby.
Oh, was that a real story?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The movie was based on...
Yeah. So what happened was, in the early 70s, I believe, they were in the outback, Australia, family, a few kids, and an infant, like a 3-month-old baby or something.
Oh, geez.
And it was late at night, and the mother is changing the diapers in the car, on the front seat.
Yeah.
The mother turns around to get diapers or something, and when she turned around back to the baby, the baby's not there.
Are you serious?
And she looks into the darkness, and she sees a dingo, which is a large dog-like creature, carrying the baby in its mouth and wandering off into the darkness. And there's so much in the wilderness that as soon as she kind of chases, she loses it. And then she just starts screaming, a dingo ate my baby, a dingo ran off with the baby. And there was, obviously a lot of police showed up and It became not only a national story, but an international story. Right. And you're like, why, right? It's so then all the news cameras and everything, and we're talking weeks, months later, she might be walking from her car to the courthouse, and she doesn't show any emotion on her face because,
oh my gosh,
because there's no emotion to show. One, two, people don't always histrionically show their emotion on their face
24/7.
Yeah.
Oh, dingo ate my baby again.
Yeah. But that's literally the way the public still to this day sees human beings. That if a mother, and no accusations to the father, by the way, father saying,
well, no, because they're supposed to be stoic.
Yeah.
You're supposed to not show emotion.
Right. But there was a famous case, or not famous, but a representative case of a father who arrived at the scene and finds fire trucks at his trailer, at his, mobile home, and it's burned to a crisp. And he's like, what happened? And they're like, well, it burnt to the ground, and actually it looks like your 2 kids were inside.
Oh, God.
And he said, what? And asked questions, but didn't show any emotion.
Right.
And it's one thing for a police officer to have that raise suspicion, but it's another thing for it to be a prosecutor's main data point for guilt. Yeah. And it's another thing for a jury to be convinced by that.
Right.
So with Amanda Knox, Lindy Chamberlain, and also with, this fella, Anthony Temple. Yeah. You have these examples of people who have no visible emotion after going through something really difficult. So there's 2 paths that Anthony could have been on that would lead him to have no affect in that moment. One is everyone deals with trauma differently.
Right.
For example, Lita, our very first co-host from 14 years ago.
Lovely Lita.
Her sister died in a car accident when we were in high school.
Yeah.
I was actually going over to her house that morning because we were going to go look for a job in high school. And I knock on the door, and Lita hadn't canceled with me, but they had just found out an hour earlier that their beloved child and sister was dead. And actually another, one of her friends had died as well in the car. For Lita, she didn't feel any emotion about it for basically a year.
Yeah.
She was just going through the motions, and there was an outpouring. They were really involved in their church, and Lita was very popular in school, and so there's all this attention given to her. And I remember that she didn't really talk about it. She didn't cry, and we were really close. We hung out all the time. I would have seen something. A year later, we're hanging out. I don't know how it came up, but somehow the subject came up, and then she just started crying. Yeah. And I hugged her, and then later on she said, "That's the first time I've cried in a year." So is Lita a psychopath? No, it is a fact that human beings deal with difficult situations in a variety of ways. Yeah. And this notion that somehow you can predict what a normal person would respond emotionally and what an abnormal or a guilty person would respond is just not borne out in the science. But in the courtroom, prosecutors, investigators, family members, jurors, they still have this ridiculous notion.
Well, especially, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but when you're younger, I think there's also different perceptions about life, time, change, all these kinds of things. So for example, when my grandpa died, I had just moved to the States. I was probably 16 and my grandpa died. I knew he was going to die because when I left, he was already pretty sick. Then when he died, it didn't hit me that much. I was sad, but it didn't hit me that much. And then years later, I went and saw my grandma, and she had Alzheimer's. And then I left, and then she died a few years later. And again, I was very sad, but it didn't hit me as much. And then years later, I had several crying bouts, years like a decade later, like a crying bout that was like almost unstoppable, just remembering my grandma and thinking about my grandpa and the loss. I hadn't processed it. And that was just because, it's just your brain doesn't really get everything. And life goes on. And then all of a sudden things hit you in a way unexpectedly. So let alone if you've been not socialized and you have attachment disorders, like you have a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, so let's talk about the attachment piece that you're bringing up. For sure, he has attachment issues because he, as a young child, was experiencing a lot of conflict in his household. 0 to 5, he is with his mom and his dad, and his dad is, I think, in and out of the house, seemingly. It seemed like, because the mom was saying she was basically alone with Anthony, and the dad was there kind of.
Because he had his work was pretty involved.
Okay. And so he might have just by that had some disruption because the dad's absence occasional. But then there are 2 incidents in which the dad kidnaps Anthony, once when he's 7 months, and then more notably when he's 5 or 6 or something, and disappears. So that disruption of where's mom, you can relate to that.
Well, yeah. In fact, I originally thought this might have been why you asked me to watch it. I didn't know.
No, I didn't know anything about it.
You didn't know anything about it. But I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my gosh, because he's very little and his mom leaves him the first time. She leaves because she is afraid for her life. Her narration of it is that she wants to take him with her, and the guy grabs him and is like, "You're not taking him." And then she's afraid for her life, and so she flees. She goes away,
thinking that she would come right back or with the authorities and get her son.
That's right. And then that didn't happen for a long time, and then she was able to get him back. Then he's able to go to the authorities and claim that she's insane and on drugs and all these things, and then he's able to take him again away from her. So as I was watching this, I'm sitting there thinking, about my story, and there are definitely those parallels where my mom felt unsafe and felt that if she took me with her, she would be in danger. And then the flip side of my feelings about it, which is I can't picture myself doing that. I can't picture myself just leaving, but then I'm also a guy, and then all of this was going through my head. Because it is there's parts of me that it still can't comprehend how someone could just leave. And then there's that other, and the narration in this documentary, it's a little more extreme. Like, she was leaving notes all over the house saying, hey, if I'm found dead, it's like because he killed me.
Well, couldn't you also, because doesn't your mom claim that she was worried your dad was going to kill her?
That's what I'm saying, that she felt that way, and that's fine. It's just that personally, for me, that would be even more of a reason for taking the kid, right? Like, I'm like, well, if that were the case.
But when you hear the documentary, how it laid out, does it make sense?
That's why I'm saying that in her case, it's more extreme sounding, because he was apparently hiring someone to kill her.
Well, we don't know if it was more extreme.
Well, it's her narration of it.
It sounds credible.
And that's why, if I am to believe her, this sounds like he at any point, he was actually literally trying to kill her. He was trying to take a life insurance out on her. He hired a killer, all these kinds of things.
Well, so it's hard to know if the dad who was killed by Anthony was actually going to kill anyone.
But it seems like she really believed it.
Yeah. Or if he used it as a tactic,
right.
Or, but you have two of his wives, Susan and Anthony's mom,
yeah,
both saying they feared for their life.
Yeah.
There's just a vibe that some abusive people will give off.
Right.
But I guess with your mom was a little different, because from the way you told the story to me, she sits you down in front of the TV and gives you an apple and walks out.
Yeah.
There wasn't this emergency in the moment. It wasn't like in that moment she thought, oh my God, I'm going to get killed.
That's right.
For Anthony's mom, the way that it seemingly turned out was that I think her parents were over at the house, and Bert, the abusive father who was killed, was being very physically abusive with the mom. And because people were over at the house, it emboldened her, because prior to that, she had been beaten much worse and was scared all the time. But because there were people over, I think they encouraged her to leave, or gave her the courage to leave or something. And so she's thinking, okay, I got to grab my son, Anthony. Yeah. But Bert is holding Anthony as a tool to manipulate. So honestly, if I were in that situation and I were a friend or a therapist to the mom, I would say, don't worry about Anthony right now, because he's just using Anthony as a tool. Go to court and all this will be worked out. No one would predict that Bert, the father, would kidnap Anthony for 11 years.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that I get both sides. I get from the rational, kind of cold viewpoint of, I'm not in the situation right now. I could see how someone would do that, and I can understand it. And then there's the other side of me that says, I can't imagine me personally leaving the child in any circumstance, right? But I'm also a guy, and so there is that aspect too.
And you haven't been beaten down, and you're not like in a state of absolute terror. And like I said, if I saw that scene, Bert, who I say I know that he has a big temper, he's a very abusive person, but he doesn't tend to abuse his kid, and there's no reason to believe he's going to kill his kids. But there is a reason to believe he's going to kill his wife. And the wife is sitting there thinking, okay, what am I going to do? I get into a physical altercation with Bert to wrestle my son away from him. Do I think that Bert's going to hand the kid over without it becoming physical? Might the wife, the mom trying to get away, lose her temper and strike him, and then she's the one, or the child is dropped on his head? It's a flashpoint problem. There's no easy answer. You're picking from the lesser of several evils, and it is a smart thing sometimes to just get away, and then you deal with the authorities later.
And I get it. There's no situation in which I would leave, because at that point the child trumps my safety, right? So I personally wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I can understand how someone did. Now, in my personal case, I'm a little less understanding because I'm like, come on now. You could have just taken me with you. It's like, but I'm afraid. I'm like, well, then take me with you because you're afraid.
Well, the thing about your mom is that she left the hemisphere. She could have left.
Oh, she went to the other side of the country. Yeah.
Oh.
Because we were in Massachusetts. She went to...
in my head, you're always in Bogota.
No, we were already up here.
Oh, okay. And then she went to Tacoma from Massachusetts. which, okay, it's far away.
Yeah, it's the other side of the country.
Yeah, she could have at least moved temporarily to the other side of town,
Right.
work out the parenting situation,
That's
but she just, took off. Now, we don't know. I mean, maybe it was reasonable for your mom to believe that she was in mortal danger, and it was just better that she left.
But the facts didn't bear that out, because my dad ended up letting her see me, and I get it. I get how she was feeling trapped. I just can't fully just write a check and here, go cash this.
Yeah. There's a lot of other things that could have been done. Yeah. And especially a year later or 6 months later, once you're safe and everything's calmed down, and your dad well enough to know that he's not like Bert, right? Well, let's take a break. We get back. Let's talk about it more. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So I want to get back to the flat affect thing. There's a lot of reasons why someone might have flat affect, and that's the term that we use. Affect meaning the visible display of one's emotion. Flat meaning just flatlining.
Yeah, where they're asking him, and it's there's just never a deviation. There's no sadness, anger. It's just
right. There's a lot of different paths to it. One is depression, obviously. Another is a PTSD reaction. Dissociation is another. Another is having a personality disorder in which you don't really have interest in interact. It's like the opposite of histrionic. You really just don't care about interacting with other people. Obviously, being on various different spectrums could be a part of this as well. But the one that I would imagine was true for him, particularly because by the end of the documentary, he actually breaks down and cries quite intensely, which I cried more than he cried. His attorney cried more than he cried. But his crying was powerful. And the pathway is not necessarily, I mean, you could relate it to attachment, but it's attachment based, I suppose, in that he's probably emoting normally until the age of 5. So he has a regular set of emotions. He might be a little reserved. Maybe he's a little subdued, but he's not not noticeably flat affect. I mean, he was flat affect 24/7.
Yeah.
He goes into prison, flat affect. The day he gets out, flat affect. He's being interviewed about it, flat affect. He just killed his dad, the police show up, flat affect. How you get there is, I'm guessing that 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, his dad is basically just not paying attention to him at all. There's no interaction. He's homeschooling the kid, so he has no friends. There's no hanging out with other kids. He's not going to school. He isn't talking with anyone on the phone. He basically just has his dad and eventually his stepmom, Susan, and his stepbrother, I suppose. But his dad is so abusive and he's so scary as the dad. And also remember that he feels abandoned by his mom, because the story from Bert is
she's a drug addict.
Yeah, she's a junkie, and so we need to get away from her.
Right.
And as a kid, you're 6, 7 years old, you start forgetting the details, and how would you know about the details when you're 5? And so you just figure, oh, my 2 siblings, my brother and my sister and my mom, they all abandoned me.
Oh, he didn't even know about his siblings, or he'd forgotten.
Well, when he's 5, he knew.
He's 5, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, at 6 years old, he probably still remembered his mom and his, and at that state, he's like, oh, they don't like me, they don't love me, they hate me, they threw me away. My dad is the only one that actually loves me,
and he
doesn't pay attention to me, and he's abusive. And so, as a person in that situation, you have a number of different choices. One of the choices, as you continue to signal, because you imagine when he's 5, 6, he's signaling, he's crying, he wants a hug, he wants attention in his maybe reserved, end of the spectrum way, and he's getting nothing back or he's getting abused. Everything is his fault. It's just classic. All the things you're saying, just classic abuse. And you neurologically shut down. You not only consciously, but you neurologically shut down. What's the point? Why signal? Why even notice your emotions if it's just going to give you more pain? And over time, neurologically, you could be having, a roiling of emotion on the inside of you, but it doesn't register consciously or even in your affect. You might, it'd be interesting to hook him up to some biomarker device to see if his heart rate is going up or something.
Yeah.
I would guess that it was. If it wasn't, then that would mean that he literally doesn't have
psychopath.
Yeah, or I mean, psychopaths do have emotion, but there are just some people that anyway. Point is that that's the path to that no emotion, and you would think that police would know this.
Yeah.
The whole time I'm watching this, there were two themes, and I don't know if it was just manipulation on the documentary, but one, I'm like, you are the police. It's not like you're a baker and you're arriving at the house where there's possible abuse and you don't know the signs of an abused child. You're a police officer. This is your wheelhouse.
In Louisiana, I don't know.
Well, some awareness,
Yeah.
but at least the prosecutor, you know, as she's talking about how he has no affect and all that kind of stuff. And so, I don't know. So maybe they left out some police officer saying...
Well, no, because even the judge was saying the same thing.
Right.
She's like, I find it, like I look, every time he comes to the courtroom, he just shows me nothing. So I'm thinking, I don't know, am I releasing a madman who's going to go on a killing spree?
Right. So that's one thing. The other thing was, and I don't know, again, I don't know, you never know if you actually get to talk to the actual investigators and detectives, but you have some random woman
Yeah.
who just has an amateur DNA detective hobby. During the investigation, she's the one
who figures...
she's the one who figures out that the Bio family has been looking for him for 11 years.
That's insane, right? Like, wouldn't that be part of the investigation?
Shouldn't you be embarrassed as all shit? This happens often. Like
Yeah.
with the documentary about Hunter Moore, the most hated man on the internet documentary. Did you watch that?
No, not yet.
So it was about the revenge porn.
Yeah, I know what it is, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Well, what ended up happening, do you want me to tell you what happened?
No, don't spoil it. I want to
Okay.
see it.
Well-
I'll watch it. Why don't we do an episode about it?
I did a whole series
okay,
of episodes about it, but I actually interviewed one of the women who was victimized, who was in the documentary. Apparently you don't listen to the podcast.
Not every episode. No.
And what was I saying? Oh, I won't say exactly what happened, but the police were very much outshined
by
by
someone else.
a citizen.
This seems to happen a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
A lot of these documentaries, that's what happens. It's like, and then some other random person
Yeah.
put the pieces together.
Yeah. And I guess it's yay for the people, but I don't know. I just feel like what the police should do is when they find someone that can
Like hire them.
or hire them as a consultant.
Yeah.
Or contract them for individual cases. Like, okay, we got 5 cases, give it to Susan.
She found out that one thing.
Yeah. She'll
Yeah.
figure this out. And yeah, it's just upsetting.
I know, that is crazy.
'Cause, you
Well,
know-
and then the thing about, wait, you don't know your birth date? Like, you're not sure? Like, we got to follow up on this. Like, what's that about?
But the way they were painting it, it's like he's lying or
Oh, right.
he's
Which is
developmentally
but that would be
disabled.
such a weird thing to lie about.
Right. And it was funny when I was watching, well, not funny, but when I was watching the documentary, because, he didn't know the year of his birthday. He's 17 years old at the time. So this is after he killed his father. He's in
It's
the
like, I was born, I don't know, this time or
2000, 2001,
Yeah.
which gives you more evidence that the father didn't even have the wherewithal
They didn't have birthdays.
to even tell him how old he was, really. He didn't even have the attention span to his child to tell him that much. He was,
By the way, because you said, up until 5 years, but let's not forget that those first 5 years, according to the mom, because she said that she assumed everyone's life is like this, where she's
Right.
constantly being abused.
Yeah.
So that household was not a pretty picture.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. He didn't know his address. He didn't know his mom. He didn't know her name. He didn't know if he had grandparents, this kind of thing. And at the time when I'm watching the documentary, I'm like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
But then when we find out that he was abducted 11 years ago, you're like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
It all makes sense.
And then the dad would purposely obfuscate things because he doesn't want him to piece things together.
Right. Now, he's homeschooled, quote unquote, but at the age of 16, according to Susan, his stepmom, he had a 3rd grade level education. So even if he did go back to school, he would have to enter the third grade.
That's
at
insane.
At age 16.
A 17-year-old.
Yeah. So that just says massive amounts of neglect there. Yeah. And okay, so going down my notes, yeah, lots of abuse, lots of reports of abuse by the stepbrother, his two wives, Susan and the mom, by Anthony himself, by other family members. The neighbors said there's something kind of weird about the guy.
The other thing I don't understand is they're like, but there's no evidence of any sort of abuse.
Yeah.
Well, what counts as evidence?
Yeah.
Because just interview all these people.
And again, you're a prosecutor, you're a police officer.
Yeah.
You think that is a viable data point for discounting someone's claim?
There's no hospitalization.
Yeah. How often does anything like that happen? You know, it's like, come on. So, all right, especially child abuse.
Yeah.
If it's a single dad and a kid, and the dad is abusing the kid, and it's reported that the dad is all-encompassing controlling, you know, cameras. He has GPS systems on, and then you hear that he didn't even go to the dentist. Anthony had never been to
a doctor, a dentist, nothing.
Had never been to the physician, had never been to the dentist.
Come on now. And did I not understand, like, the dad actually served time in the past for family abuse, for abuse.
Yeah, several times.
Like,
yeah. I mean, it makes me wonder if the documentary was showing clips, like they talked to the prosecutors, like, tell us what you were thinking at the time.
Right.
And she'd be like, well, I now know, like, da-da-da-da. Because by the end of the documentary, the prosecutor was, I thought, great. She was like, well, yeah, I'm not going to press the murder 2 charge because, I mean, look at the whole story.
Well, I'm not even, you know, I'm not faulting the judge, the prosecutor. I'm just saying, you're right. It could just be the way they laid it out. But some of the things where they're like, man, but there's no evidence. I'm like, that's surprising. It means that no one's interviewed any of the family members, at least.
Yeah. So let's look at the actual event itself and talk about self-defense, the sort of moral, legal, ethical questions here. So we know that the dad was perhaps one of the most abusive, violent, aggressive people that you will ever meet. The reports from his 2 wives were extensive, severe. Anthony's mom, like you said, would leave Post-it notes around the house.
If I die, it was him.
If I die, it was him.
Like,
yeah. And I've worked with people like that before, and it's a sign, especially when Bert might not have ever threatened her, right? Well, then we should add, if you didn't watch the documentary, Bert reported, so a man shows up at the house while Bert is not there, talks to the wife and says,
you gotta leave.
You gotta leave because he hired me to kill you, and he's on his way home right now. You gotta go. And, you know, who knows if that's really what happened.
Yeah.
It probably is, given everything. But anyway, so also controlling Anthony, abusing him, the cameras, the GPS tracker on his phone, the constant surveillance. There's and these corroborating evidence. You know, he gets a job, which is kind of weird, right? That the dad would let him get a job.
And he apparently was answering all the interview questions, right?
Yeah.
It's like, don't ask him, just talk to me.
What was that? Oh, right. Yeah, so Anthony goes to but you could imagine, even if the dad, let's say the dad actually wanted him to get the job, Anthony's social skills are so poor that the dad might have had to have talked for him. Anyway, so Anthony gets this job, and the boss at the job, you know, because it's like a farm or a horticultural place or something, and the dad calls the workplace and says, I notice on his GPS on his phone, he hasn't moved in 30 minutes. What's going on?
Jesus.
And the boss is like, he's working in the same spot.
Like, what are you
he's in the same general area as he works for the past and this happened a number of times. So this is someone that is irrationally controlling. Like there's no reason for that.
Wait, and like the sense, of course, who knows, but it was probably also afraid that he was going to go try to find his mom or his, you know.
Right. Yeah. And they laid out a speculation around why, because if you're that shitty of a dad, why would you want Anthony?
Yeah.
And the speculation, which is a strong one, is that he just didn't want the mom to have Anthony.
That's the punishment.
He wanted to punish the mom by taking Anthony away, but he didn't actually want to parent Anthony.
Right.
And it's just like the tragedy of that
Yeah.
for Anthony. I mean, at the end of the documentary, Anthony is free, by the way. He's free to go, and he's living his life now. But the lifetime of difficulties.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm terrified this kid's going to develop a drug addiction.
I watched an interview that the lawyer has been keeping up with him.
Okay.
Because he's kind of acting as a parental figure. Plus, he's got to check in with him because of the parole.
Probation.
And so they did a short interview on YouTube. And apparently he hasn't seen any other members of his family since the documentary. So he hasn't seen his stepmom or stepbrother or mom or anything. The only person he's been interacting with other than where he works and stuff is with the lawyer.
Wow.
Which just more evidence to like he's got a problem with forming these bonds, you know.
Yeah.
And the good news, but it could be tricky, is a lot of people have donated money to him, and you know, hopefully, and he's trying to do his GED and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's hard. Like I just look at myself, all the struggles I went through later in life, meaning in like my late 20s, early 30s, from what I went through. And I didn't go through a fraction of what this kid went through.
Well, and you had the protective factor that you felt like you could interact with human beings.
Right.
That you could have friends, that you could go to college, that you could seek romance, this sort of thing. And for him, there's this huge barrier to healing.
Yeah.
There was also, I don't know if they talked about this in the interview, but I read the lawyer was talking about how he is, it sounded like sporadically going to therapy when he finds the time.
I didn't hear that. One thing they did mention, so before the documentary came out, but after he was released, he ended up leaving. He was living with his stepmom and then left because they were not getting along. So then he was nearly homeless for a bit. And then he's been able to he has a job and he's got money from donations now. But yeah, he's already been through some struggles, and it's not surprising.
Right. And without relationships, without healing, without closeness, the trauma just stews within him.
Yeah.
And drug addiction will come knocking on his door. I mean, it sounded like the mom also suffered from some severe drug addiction. The dad was a pretty severe alcoholic.
That's right.
So the concern is there for me. I mean, what a tragedy that would be, right? Yeah. That for 25 years he goes down a rabbit hole like that. So a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of control, a lot of monitoring of him, a lot of just not really interacting with him. He's in his room all the time as a teen, playing video games, keeping to himself. He's just trying to lay low. He would talk as long as I was not noticeable to my dad, I didn't get abused as often. So I just stayed in my room, no interacting with anyone, no schooling, no nothing.
That, by the way, I've heard that before too, about people that were in abusive households, that they just mostly wanted to stay out of the Eye of Sauron, you know.
And he is kind of like Nell in a way, right? This neglected individual who's chained to a post in an isolated chamber with no view of the outside world. And even though he wasn't, but emotionally he was, and in a lot of some practical ways he was. And then also the police are called several times. The police. So here's another. Let's add this to my gripes of the police. Yeah. In front of the dad, the police officer goes to Anthony because there were allegations. So I think this is as Susan, the stepmom of Anthony. She is being severely abused by Bert, and Susan takes her.
And the stepson was too.
Yeah, so Susan takes her son, leaves, and then tells the authorities, by the way, you got to get Anthony out of that house because Bert is a horrible human being. There's all these horrible things that are happening. The homeschooling, he's at a 3rd grade level. He won't take him to the dentist. All these allegations that should be alerting someone about something. A police officer, not a CPS worker, by the way. It should have been a CPS
That's
worker.
right. That was another. He's underage.
Yeah. That means either the police didn't call CPS or CPS didn't respond. Who knows? Or CPS did. It's hard to know.
They're underfunded in that area. Who knows?
I mean, but even underfunded CPS departments they'll do something. They'll call or something. Anyway, a police officer apparently shows up to the house and asks Anthony in front of the dad, "Are you being abused?"
Right.
I would say a fifth grader with no education in police and law enforcement understands that is not effective investigation of abuse of a child. That comes from an attitude of screw children, they exaggerate, and I don't want to do anything about this. I've seen that before.
And it could be, I wonder, there's a little bit of like, oh, this is a guy. He's already looks like a bigger dude, he's like, it looks almost like an adult. So what's he whining about?
Right.
Oh, so his dad smacked him around a little bit? Well, good.
Exactly.
Some discipline.
Yeah. The ageism of teenagers, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's enraging.
But it was even more surprising that they were trying to use that as some sort of evidence.
Yeah.
Like, well, the cop asked him.
Yeah. It's in the record.
The cop asked him.
So as I say that out loud, if anyone is responsible for Bert's murder, it's the system. It's the police.
I knocked on the window. The gal, I asked her, she said she was fine. Well, but the guy had a knife to her throat. She could have said something.
Hey, she said she was okay.
She's okay.
Yeah. So
who knows what kind of kinky things,
My hands are tied. The system has broken down. He's alone. Susan has left. The dad, Bert, is filling him with a bunch of things in his head, saying like Susan and her family wants to get you there because they were coming to the house to what were they coming to the house for? To like serve him papers. Yeah. Yeah. And the father, Bert, was hiding.
Like, they're trying to beat you up or kill you or something.
Yeah, and he was hiding behind the door with a gun. It's a bunker at this point for no reason. And the father is drinking more and more. He's drinking every night to excess, and he's getting more paranoid and more violent. He's starting to talk about demons and angels, and he's
telling Anthony that he's a demon. Like he's possessed. He's a demon, whatever.
Right. And Bert is walking around the house with a gun. He's sleeping with a gun. All this kind of thing. The son, Anthony, hates his father, has always hated his father. So let me ask you, Berto, what were his options, Anthony, at that point?
Well, there's the real options, and then there's the options he probably thought he had.
Yeah, real options.
Real options is run away, and just run away.
So, of course, why is that not an option for him?
Well, I don't even know that he was aware of that there are options, because it's our reality as we're discussing this is so far removed from what his reality would have been. Right. So he probably thinks, well, first of all, this is just my life. It's shitty, right? This is just my shitty life. Also, if I try to do anything, this guy's going to kill me.
Right. That's the thing. Like, if I run away, the cops will get me and they'll bring me back.
And they don't do anything. I've already seen they don't do anything.
They'll bring me back.
Right.
And then my dad will truly kill me.
Right.
What's another option?
All of them involve getting the hell away and then trying to find his mom or his stepmom or whatever, like trying to find other adults that could help him.
Right.
But he doesn't go to school, so he can't tell a teacher.
If anyone
he can't tell the doctor because he doesn't go to the doctor.
Yeah. The only adult who really could have helped him was Susan, and she was not able to help him.
Right. That's why I'm saying running away is like the only thing.
The other factor to not running away is he doesn't know how to get around in life. He doesn't. Yeah. He's never been on his own. He doesn't know how to get around in the world. So there's that. He doesn't think he can call the police. He might not even know about CPS. So he's completely cut off, no options, and he has every reason to believe that, because of course he knows logically I could just run away. He I'm sure that.
Well, maybe it's not. Again, it doesn't seem like the one gal was saying that he didn't even know about high five. Like,
right?
There's who knows what he knows.
Yeah. But he knows
plays video games.
He knows physics, basic physics of. He knows he can walk out the door. Right,
but to your point, because I'm saying that as like realistically, that is something he could have done. But at the same time, where do I stay? Like, what does it mean to like the concept of running away? Like, where am I running to?
Right.
What is it that I'm doing?
Yeah.
It's not like he can go to an uncle, a cousin, the neighbors. Like, right?
Yeah.
So I still believe that that's the thing he could have done, but
Right. So then the dad notices that Anthony's on his phone and gets paranoid about Anthony texting or calling
his
Susan.
mom, stepmom, yeah.
Because the stepmom and all their family are coming to the house and saying, we need to serve you papers.
Right.
And threatening him, like one of Susan's brother or something is saying, you pussy, get out here.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the father's inside, 12 beers in out of 24, with a shotgun in his hand, standing behind the door. And Anthony's also hiding because the dad's saying, you better hide because he's going to kill us.
They're going to kill us.
He's going to kill you. And
yeah, he made it sound like they're after him, like after Anthony.
Right. So at this point, Anthony gets 2 guns and stashes them in his room, or he owned 2 guns. I don't know. And the dad comes over, is looking at his phone, and is trying to take away his phone. And Anthony is like, no, don't take away my phone. So let me pause here for a second. This is I learned this the hard way a long time ago, that there are certain flashpoints for violence between parents and children, and this is one of them. When a parent says, okay, you're done with the phone, and they try to grab the phone, kids will strike, even though they've never stricken before. Or another one is trying to get kids out of bed in the morning.
Okay.
There are things what I wouldn't think, right?
Because like their animal instincts take over.
I think it's just, that's a way to put it. It touches something primal in humans, regardless of age.
Like, you're stealing my life.
Or this is mine. Possession is 90% of the 9/10 of the law.
Well, the phone has become such a personal thing that it is like you're taking part of my body away from me.
Right. But even just trying to get something out of someone else's, say they're just holding like a hot dog, and you're just trying to grab the hot dog. We have a primal thing about, this is mine, and
dude,
you can't take it. And if as a parent you grab it, it feels justified to the child, I think, to many of them, to strike back because you started it. You grab it, and I strike you.
Try to take something away from a dog. Like, that's one of the basic games you can play with a dog, but there's a reason why that's a game, because they're trained intrinsically in their genetics to not let go of those things.
Right. So he does that. The dad does that. The dad's saying, I don't like secrets, this kind of thing.
Right.
The dad grabs a phone. There's apparently some kind of scuffle, a fist fight of some sort. The son runs away into his room, which is what he's always going to do, locks himself in the room. The dad tries to break down the door, even though in my notes it says bread down the door.
And he tries to bread down the door with his kicks.
And there's evidence of that, like the door is bashed in on that side. He is at that point thinking, he's going to kill me.
I mean, that moment right there, there's a reason why in The Shining that scene is so discomforting, so scary. Because as humans, we know that, okay, there's a barrier protecting me right now. But as soon as that barrier starts getting destroyed, that is like, oh God, right? It's gotta be akin to, okay, I have a lance in my hands, and that's keeping that big cat away. But now the lance is broken and the cat is lunging. Yeah. It's just scary.
Right. And he's drinking 24 beers a day. He's holding guns. He's paranoid. He's talking about demons, and you're a demon. He lost his job. He's in debt, $80,000. His wife has left him. Everything is falling apart. Oh, and Susan posts on Nextdoor to announce to all the neighbors.
Oh, right. Yeah, the whole thing about publicly shaming him. Yeah.
She posts a protective order, which goes into full detail about how abusive Bert is. And he is sitting there, Bert, his whole life is falling apart.
Right.
And he grabs the phone, and Anthony knows about all this, locks himself in the room. He's banging. Now, the police officer says, well, couldn't you have walked out the window? Couldn't you have snuck out the window? There are 2 windows in your room. Like, why didn't you go out the window? Because to police, self-defense is when you have no other choice. When you reasonably believe that someone is going to cause you serious bodily harm or kill you. and you have no other choice. Like, if you're standing there, and I'm not a lawyer, but I watch YouTube channels that kind of analyze these things. And if you're, for instance, on the street and say you have a gun on you and someone comes after you with a knife or something, you start backing up and the guy with the knife stops and you're, say, 30 yards from the guy with the knife. And the guy says, I'm going to kill you with this knife. And you take a few steps back and the guy doesn't chase you, you pull out the gun, you shoot him. You could be found guilty of murder in that situation because it could be found that you could have continued to move away. You chose to. Now, some states have laws about stand your own ground and all this kind of stuff. But the working model of trying to understand self-defense, because the door was closed, and sure, Bert was trying to break down the door, but the kid could have gone out the window. But not only did he not do that, but he opened the door with the gun. Bert sees the gun, runs away and around a corner into the bathroom. Anthony follows him into the bathroom and shoots him 3 times, 1 time in the head, while I think he's on the ground. And so
I think he shot him once, and then he ran to the bathroom. The guy ran to the bathroom, and then he followed him.
So he shoots him 3 times. And at least twice when he is not only running away from him, but also injured. And this is not a typical self-defense case. It's hard to align that with it. If he opens the door, the dad lunges at him, he shoots him. Okay. If he opens the door and moves away from the door, breaks down the door and he's trying to get out of the window, but he doesn't believe he's going to get out in time, turns around, shoots the dad continues to move towards him, shoots him 2 more times. That's classic self-defense. You don't usually see a case in which it is found self-defense is a viable defense when you are chasing the person around a corner. So, but is it self-defense, Berto?
Well, so first off, you mentioned stand your ground. So I guess Louisiana must not have that, but I just watched another case about an ex-boyfriend that was coming to a door of this gal and knocking on the door and wanting to get in and started trying to force his way in. The dad of the gal shot him, killed him. He warned him. He's like, don't come in, I got a gun, and then shot him, killed him. It never went to trial. It got dismissed on stand your ground. Again, the other guy didn't have a gun. He was just trying to break in.
But so, and I've watched a lot of analyses. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but one, people can cause serious bodily harm.
Sure, absolutely.
Without a weapon. 2,
he was breaking their front door, right?
Yeah.
And he's like ex-boyfriend who was abusive and stuff.
Right. 2, if you have a gun and they're coming at you, it's viable to consider they're going to take my gun and shoot me.
That's the stand your ground reason. So,
but I don't even think it has to be stand your ground. I think that even holds up as self-defense.
Normal states, okay. I don't know if Louisiana has
normal states.
Well, normal states, because some of these states are not normal. Okay, but what I will say is this: do I think that
states that Zimmerman?
Do I think that he kind of got away with more than he would have normally? Yes, I actually do, but I'm not upset about it. Like, I think that, yes, I believe, without being a lawyer or anything, I would imagine that if you rerun that scenario 10 times, probably maybe 7 out of the 10, the person gets convicted. In this case, I think it was the right call ultimately, but a little bit of luck, quite a bit of luck, because I think the prosecution could have leaned heavily into, but wait, like, he didn't take steps to, like, stop himself, or
I have a gun.
Yeah. And the dad said, don't shoot anymore. Like, stop shooting. The dad said that after he shot him the first time.
Right. Oh, you're talking. I thought you were talking about the other case. So you're wait. So start over about.
Oh yeah, I was only giving that one as an example of.
Say what you said about Anthony.
Yeah, I'm saying that
the prosecution. What?
The prosecution, in my mind, could have really tried to die on this hill and said, look, yes, this is horrible what happened to him and everything, but number one, he really planned this out. He had 2 guns. Number 2, he didn't really give a fair warning. Number 3, after the guy was shot once and said, don't shoot again, he still chased him down and killed him in cold blood, right? Okay. I think they could have.
And I think you could have found a jury that would have
gone along with that.
Yeah.
Am I happy that they didn't do that? Or, would I have been happy? No, not based on all the evidence I've seen. But it's so I think that there's
So how much of you are cool with the results?
I am probably 80%. Happy is a weird word.
So what's the 20%? What's the 20%?
The 20% is that it is hard when you take someone's life. There has got to be a high standard, really high standard for taking someone's life, and that's the part that tragedy was already done. So there's part of me that goes, look, you don't want to get shot to death. Don't do what you did for the last 20 years with this kid. Fair enough. But then there's the other part of me that goes, what are the consequences? And I think the consequences that we're given, well, you have to be on probation and you have to do this and this. And maybe jail time wouldn't serve. And knowing what our jails are like, that's probably the right call. But it's just that's part of me. And it's what would have happened if I were in the jury, probably. That I would have been tempted, but still probably gone ahead and said, yeah, let him go,
Yeah, people might say, well, you could have shot him once. That would have caused the authorities to show up, right? You shoot him once, you call 911.
But he wasn't thinking this through. It's not like he's...
But not only that, that would assume on his side that when the police arrive, that they wouldn't be manipulated by Bert, which happened many times. And the ex-wives were saying that he's very good at manipulating the police.
Yeah.
So unless he takes his father out, there's reasons to believe that things would be so bad for him. Because so in his mind, it's totally viable that say he shoots him once and shoots him again, but not in the head, and he lives. He calls the cops. I shot my dad. The police show up. They treat him in the hospital, and Anthony says, my dad's been abusive. But remember, he's terrible as a communicator. and so you have every reason to believe that the father will recover, get back, and kill him later.
But I don't have any illusion that any of that was literally going through his head. I think in the moment, he was like, shoot, kill, this ends here, kind of, because like he's been in this for 17 years, and it's his only moment and chance to make it stop.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're right. And I mean, who knows, but I think you're right. And I think another thing they might have left out was him fantasizing about this.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be unusual it wouldn't be unjustified for him starting at the age of 13, going to bed every night like Arya Stark, saying, I'm gonna kill him one day. I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna kill him, as some kind of coping, right? So, yeah. Now, someone says, which I want to pose to you, Berto, does this set a precedent that anyone can just kill their abusive parents or abusive partner in cold blood and get away with it? License to kill, they said.
Again, not being a lawyer, but it'd have to be like, well, in that case, this happened. It's like, okay, well, let's see. Has your client been abused for 17 years? Was your client, in the days leading up to this, physically threatened? And was he in the moment being threatened and his door being broken down? Like, if you can recreate all these things, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting, but because there's a lot of cases like that. There's a lot of cases where you have abusive parents who were abusive for 17 years, were having alcohol issues, and were in the midst of an episode. There's a lot of times I would venture to say there's thousands of cases right now of similar situations. And so are we saying that those children, if they had a gun, they could kill their parents?
Again, was their parent breaking the door to their room? And again, that's why I'm saying you rerun this trial, I bet you 7 times out of 10 the outcome's not favorable to the defendant.
As I say it out loud, I think it is possible to have this be some kind, it's not precedent per se, but have it be some kind of guideline, if you will. If you have not only 17 years of abuse, but you also have the isolation, the nullification of his life, that he was completely cut off from the outside world and would have no way to know where to go, and had every reason to believe that even if he did run away or call the cops, that he would have incurred more consequences, perhaps even death. So it's a self-defense of this ongoing potential threat, but no direct threat from the dad. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I also, look, First of all, isn't schooling mandatory? Don't kids have to go to school by law?
Yes.
What was going on with that?
So we have a system.
Or let me just, because I want to wrap that into this bigger point, which is this. Clearly, the system fails here because
well,
there's this impression that like when it comes to parenting, laissez-faire, whatever goes behind closed doors is fine unless it gets extreme enough, I guess, and then maybe, but mostly it's like, I don't care what you teach your kid, how you teach it to them, when you teach them. You don't need a license to be a parent. You don't need training to be a parent. You could do whatever the hell you want, right? Well, that's what happens.
Yeah. Let's take a break and when we get back. I'll tell you about my experience with this topic. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So yeah, I always was under the impression that it was illegal for children not to go to school. That I would see things on juvenile delinquent TV shows where the kid would skip school. Truancy police.
Yeah.
They called them truancy police. Would come get you. And when I actually started to work with kids like this in the late 90s, I figured out, and it was never explained to me because there's a song and dance. So let me explain.
Pause. All right.
Okay, so we're back on the air, Berto, because you had to take a break because your wife was calling. So tell us about this conversation.
Oh my gosh. So I look and see like an urgent message that says, I need Dashlane help ASAP. Call, please.
What is Dashlane?
Right? Like, what's the first? Well, Dashlane is just an app that lets you store all your passwords.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure out what could be so urgent that she needs some password. Is she being held hostage? Does she need to tell someone the password? I'm like, okay. So I'm like, hey, hold on, I got to call. So I call. I'm like, what's going on? It's like, I'm trying to associate our daughter's new school laptop to the internet, and I can't because I need Dashlane, and I don't remember the Dashlane password. So I'm like, wait a minute. So you just need the Wi-Fi password. You don't need why didn't you just ask me about the Wi-Fi? Like, it's like, well, I didn't think you could send it over a text message. And I'm like, well, of course, like someone's gonna hack our text messages, drive to our house and start stealing our Wi-Fi. So she's like, okay, fine, just give me the damn password.
Well, you do have a pretty buttoned up password system.
Yes.
Like your Wi-Fi password is
legit.
Well, it's like 17,000 characters. and it's all annoying. Okay, uppercase A, lowercase Z.
Yeah.
That weird symbol that you never use on the keyboard.
Exactly.
Times 5. The Declaration of Independence with no spaces.
I'm not saying it's easy to remember. That's fair.
Yeah.
It's just,
you give off a vibe of...
That's true. So maybe it's like, well, we can't willy-nilly.
Yeah. So here's what happens. I would be working with parents that were really upset that their kid was skipping school all the time.
Yeah.
Because there'd be kids that literally hadn't gone to school in 2 years.
2 years?
Oh, yeah. Long periods of time.
Oh, my God.
Because the kid just refuses. What are you supposed to do as a parent? You can ground them. You can take away TV. You can take away their phone. You can take
That
away...
is so shocking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of not that big of a deal because not going to school is much less of a problem than if the kid is threatening the parents or selling drugs out of the garage. I had another kid that stole a different car every night for 30 days in a row and crashed 3 of them. And the parents are liable for the damage.
Gosh.
Yeah. So there's, lots of issues.
Wow.
But anyway, so what would happen is, I'd be working with the parents and they're like, how do we help our kid with a variety of issues, including their truancy? And the parents would get a letter in the mail from the school threatening them. And it's pretty threatening. It would be this letter of like, if your kid does not go to, it doesn't say if you don't put effort into it, says if your kid is not in school within the next X amount of days, you will be fined X amount of dollars per day.
Oof.
And it was not cheap. It was hundreds of dollars or something per day that your kid misses school. Any amount of school.
My God.
And so as a parent, you flip out. You're like, wait, what? I'm doing everything in my power to get my kid to go to school. And now you're going to fine me? And the first 15 times I experienced this, I was appalled as well. But then I learned it's just a threat.
Okay.
So that's why I hesitate to tell people this because I'm sure none of y'all are terrible Washington parents that are listening right now, but it's just a threat. They never follow through.
Okay.
The only chance they would follow through is if it was clear that the parents were I don't know, QAnon people and preventing their kids from going to school. And even then, they probably, because after 6 months of not going to school, you could have $100,000 in fines or something. How do they even enforce that? So it's all just a song and dance. It's all just a...
I assumed an officer shows up at your house and be like, you're coming with me, young man.
No, I mean, and I don't know the law on that, but I didn't experience that. There were times when 20% of the school was truant on a given day. What's one truancy officer supposed to do? Plus, where are they supposed to find the kid? And even if they did find the kid, they're supposed to handcuff him and like drag him to school and chain him to the desk? No, let's just walk ourselves through that. The truancy officer does handcuff, brings the kid to school, puts the kid back in the desk. As soon as the kid goes to the bathroom, they're gone again, or they're not coming back tomorrow. Yeah. And what's truancy officer supposed to do? Why did I go down this road?
Because I was asking, aren't they supposed to have to go to school by law? You know?
Right. So there's that issue. The other issue is that when you move, there's no like national registry of, is this child in school?
I see.
So when he moved from Texas to Louisiana,
there might not be a record.
Louisiana doesn't know that there's a kid called Anthony in their school district that isn't going to their school.
Right.
Also, all the father has to say is he's homeschooled. There's not a lot of regulations around.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Don't you have to pass tests and blah, blah, blah? But
I don't know the details on that, but apparently those things are also unregulated and unmonitored, that kind of thing.
Wow.
The other issue
I could have saved a lot of money the last 3 years.
The other issue is that you can call CPS, of course, and CPS has a terrible reputation, but they are much better than their reputation will say. Are there negligent and abusive and terrible CPS workers? Yes, but in general, these are people that, you don't become a CPS worker because you're a jerk face. You become a CPS worker because you care about kids. And you are wanting to help. The problem is that, one, they can be overworked and stressed out. Two, they can have too many cases on their caseload. You call CPS and you say, I have this problem with this kid, you need to help. And the CPS investigates, they find, okay, this kid is being abused. They don't have the funds to actually do anything about it, necessarily. But sometimes they do. So they have to prioritize those severe cases so essentially they get 50 cases a week and they have 20 spots or 10 spots for kids to actually reside away from the house. And they have to say, okay, where are they in that ranking? Not necessarily how severe are they, but where are they in relation to the curve this week? And if you call in to CPS that week and they get 10 more severe cases than yours, they're not necessarily going to be able to do anything. And, I don't know if I have that right, but that's the way it looked to me when I was working with CPS.
It's just, we have this ridiculously Neolithic ancient model of humans know how to raise humans, right? We've been doing it for millions of years, so it's just automatic. It's fine. Whereas try to put a deck at your house or try to add a floor or something and see how much the city lets you just do whatever the fuck you want, Yeah. And there's reasons, because they don't want people to die when your deck's not built the right way. Mm-hmm. Well, when your kid's not built the right way, people die.
Yeah. And I don't know the answer precisely, but, I have my ideas. One, you raise taxes and pay for public health that not only funds public health, but also CPS and social workers and teachers and community team members. And all these people are tasked with 40 hours a week with specialty services supporting families in a variety of ways. Not only with accessing services, but also flagging families. Because presumably the father, Anthony, or Bert, he wasn't determined. He didn't wake up in the morning, say when Anthony was 12 years old. I don't think Bert woke up in the morning and says, my mission in life is to ruin Anthony's life.
Nope.
He probably was struggling, seemingly, and maybe if some connection was made, maybe there could have been, he probably still would have been an alcoholic, he probably still would have been a jerk face, but maybe there would have been some connection, someone who could have connected with Anthony at the very least, of just like, hey buddy, if you ever need anyone, here's my number, call me, all right? Yeah. And then you pay taxes to fund for these individuals, and that's the solution that I think of. And it would be easy, and we are the most, by far, wealthy country of all time. Do we not care about our fellow humans or children? Apparently
Mostly not.
Another thing this reminded me of was an HBO documentary, 2017, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. Did you watch this?
Mommy, Dead, and Dearest. I don't think I
It's about Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder imposed on another. I actually did a whole episode on this in 2017, number 546, which is so quaint since we're, I think, at like 1,500 right now. So this is a case in 2015 about Claudine Blanchard and Gypsy Rose. It's a really fascinating documentary, Berto. You got to watch. I highly recommend. And if you haven't seen it out there as a listener, I'm just going to talk about this and then we're going to close out. So just pause it now or don't listen to the rest. Go watch
it.
Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, HBO. It's one of the most, I don't know, just mind-bogglingly interesting documentaries I've ever seen.
I want to watch it.
So, Munchausen by proxy, factitious disorder imposed by another. Do you know what this is, Berto?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, you've talked about it. You actually feel like you're sick and all these things, but as a result of someone else, like your mom or parent or whatever.
Certainly that can develop, but what more specifically it is that the other person is faking that you actually have the problem. It's usually a kid. The other person, the victim of the Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder.
They start believing it, right?
They could,
okay.
And often if they're young enough, they will, but they don't necessarily even have to.
Oh, okay. I thought that that was part of it, but
yeah, like you might have a parent who is administering all sorts of home remedies, and the child knows I don't have anything wrong with me.
I see.
Often the child will become gaslit into believing they actually do have the problem. So this is a case in Missouri. Gypsy Rose was the kid, and it's super elaborate Munchausen by proxy, the perpetrator being the mom. The kid was having dozens of surgeries.
Surgeries?
Oh, yeah. Was in a wheelchair. Okay, so
gosh.
Gypsy Rose, nothing wrong with her. But after all these treatments and medications, she actually does have a lot of neurological and physical problems as a result of all the surgery.
So, let me get this straight. So normally there's something called Munchausen, which means I myself think I'm sick or whatever.
Yeah.
But the proxy is because I put this onto someone else. Like, you're sick, and I need to make sure you're better.
Right. So the basic conceptualization is that the individuals are desperate for attention and love and acceptance, and they believe the only way to get there is if someone is sick, either themselves or someone else. And she did get a ton of attention because the mom would cart her around in her wheelchair.
Get sympathy.
And get tons of sympathy. There's like news coverage and organizations and, Make-A-Wish kind of stuff. And it's all documented. And Gypsy Rose, the kid, she's such a character. I mean, she in this documentary, when you get to know her, she's a very unique individual. So
so heartbreaking.
It's really awful. I mean, they go into detail about some of these surgeries that they were doing, and you just think like, physicians, hello,
Yeah.
But how do you know? Especially because if the mom is telling Gypsy, you have to tell the doctors this, right? And the mom is injecting things into the kid to produce symptoms, like the parents or the physician's like, well, it kind of looks like this. And so there's that. And I think if I remember right, when I was watching the documentary, I was like, physicians need to be more aware of factitious disorder because a lot of them, from my memory, were like, this looked a little fishy, but I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, yeah. Anyway, so Gypsy,
that seems insane when it comes to a surgery. Like,
well,
I don't know. I mean,
so let me talk about that for a bit. And this is perhaps more commonly an issue around people who seek medical treatments that don't necessarily need them. There's a lot of people out there that are looking for meds, or they're overly anxious or whatever. And they're not Munchausen, but their go-to solution is more surgeries, more pills, more treatments. And they might even be harming themselves, or at the very least, they're wasting their time and money and resources. And when you're a physician and someone is complaining, they're just like, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
And I can't sleep at night. I have migraines. I have blurred vision. Things that only they could report to you. You can't measure them. You can't find the tumor or the broken bone. You have to ask. And they seem to be really suffering. So, and let's say this happens a lot, and you start kind of asking questions in your mind, like, is this Munchausen? Are they faking? Are they drug seeking? What's happening right now? There is almost no incentive to confront the patient in that moment, because as long as you can make a good case, you know, because the chance of being sued for malpractice
Sure.
is there. But as long as you can say, look, they were telling me X, Y, and Z. No one was telling me otherwise. And
that matches these symptoms.
Right. Whereas if you confront the patient, they could sue you, because what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
As a physician? What if they do have, or the patient, even if it is Munchausen or faking, they are able to convince other physicians that their fakery is right, and then that's a case against you. So there's very little incentive as a physician to raise this question. You know, there's not a national database you can go to, because you'd be able to check the track record of all the different, and I think it's improving because of medical records. But anyway, so we got Gypsy Rose, and she starts to age. She starts to get a little hormonal in her.
So now she's a teenager?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she meets a guy online, Nicholas Godejohn, who seems to be a problematic dude. Okay. There seems to be something problematic about it. I can't remember exactly what, but something wrong with his personality, perhaps. And Gypsy is like totally in love with this guy, I think, and you know, they're secretly talking, and the mom's like, "You're not going to talk to that guy." And I don't remember the details, but long story short, he and her plan to murder the mom.
Oh.
And then they do.
Oh.
So similar kind of case, because if you're Gypsy Rose, you've been completely gaslit. Yeah. And you've learned, and she would, Gypsy Rose, I think, occasionally tell people there's nothing wrong with me, or I think my mom's crazy. I think, anyway.
Yeah.
At the very least, there's a lot of reasons why Gypsy Rose would believe, if she goes to the authorities, that they're not going to believe her, and she's just going to go back home, and the mom will start injecting more stuff into her face.
Well, especially in that case, there's literally been a lifetime of, I know this isn't the case, but apparently no one else can see that, and so the world won't believe me.
Right. And am I crazy? Is there And so similar situation with Anthony, but she goes to prison for 10 years. And Nicholas goes to prison for life.
Yeah.
Now, Nicholas, it's like he didn't have any reason.
Yeah, dude, come on.
Yeah. But Gypsy Rose, she had reasons, right? But I think maybe the circumstances around the murder was different. Like,
so I'm telling you, man, I just don't see this always coming out in favor of the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember Lorraine Bobbitt?
Of course, yeah.
Wasn't she being abused by him?
Well, I mean, I thought it was more of infidelity and stuff like that.
Oh.
Yeah, and that she was trying to... But I don't remember all the details.
So I'll close out with saying that I did not expect to, but at the end of the documentary, I not only cried, but I sobbed. I mean, it was powerful. You know, you watch a lot of documentaries. Yeah. There's a lot of powerful moments, but the kid, he was just so shit on his entire life, and he miraculously got connected with this attorney that just decided he was going to fight and fight and fight and fight for him. And think about all the other kids who wouldn't have an attorney like that, right. And just how innocent he is as a person. And he just had this, you know, this self-defense reaction, and in his mind, he's like, okay, I'm saved. The police are going to come and I'm going to be okay. And everyone, because that's what he thought. He said, I'm going to shoot my dad, and then the police will come and they'll take me away from my dad and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you taking me to the police station? Like, I'm the victim.
Yeah.
Here.
What's got?
Yeah.
You know, it's so difficult too, because there is no system in place. Sure, they have a parole system, but they don't have a reattachment system or a empathy building system or a life healing system, other than, well, go to therapy, you know, like maybe you should go to therapy. But because that would be kind of what would be necessary. No matter what, there are things about the kid that are not okay, including the fact that he felt that in that moment he needed to like then chase after the guy and shoot him again. But all that is now untreated, you know, by parole. Parole doesn't address any of that. Getting a GED doesn't address any of that. The years of abuse are still there, and there is no system ready to catch him and hold him and help him heal.
Right.
It's left up to random chance. Maybe this lawyer can help him enough. Maybe he doesn't land into drugs. Maybe others can, you know. It's sad. There is no process.
Yeah, I guess the sadness of it is maybe just beginning or continuing for Anthony in his life. So it does give me a lot of worry about him.
I like that he's got this father figure. I just hope that it can work out. We'll see.
I don't know. I mean, I'm surprised he's not talking with his mom, his bio mom. I mean, she loves him and wants to. She was desperate. She finally found her son after 11 years, and she'd been reaching. She's probably been still reaching out to him, and he's just. It sounds like just not reciprocating, not responding.
I don't know. They didn't go into details as to who is not reciprocating or whatever. It's just the fact that was stated is that he hadn't been in contact with anyone from the documentary other than the lawyer.
Yeah.
And he said something like, you're the only one that I forget exactly. You're like the only one I can, really blah, blah, blah. He's found a father, basically.
Right.
Which is great. Who knows? It might be too much hurt. Like, it might be, he might still resent both his moms, for leaving him. Because no matter what, all circumstances explainable and stuff, but they did leave him, both of them. And even though the second one would be like, no, but then I got you back. And then your dad, like, it's like that residual thing. I feel it still. I have resentment towards my mom.
Yeah.
But who knows? I just wish that he can go to therapy and that he can avoid drugs and addiction
and find attachments.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's end on that bummer. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.